David Norman Dinkins, July 10, 1927, November 23, 2020, was an American politician, lawyer, and author who served as the 106th mayor of New York City from 1990 to 1993, becoming the first African American to hold the office. Before entering politics, Dinkins was among the more than 20,000 Montford Point Marines citation needed. Trained 1942 to 1949, Dinkins' service was 1945 to 1946. He graduated cum laude from Howard University I, and received his law degree from Brooklyn Law School, 1956. Dinkins began his political career by serving in the New York State Assembly in 1966, eventually advancing to Manhattan Borough President II, before becoming mayor. After leaving office, Dinkins joined the faculty of Columbia University. Dinkins was born in Trenton, New Jersey, the son of Sarah Sally Lucy and William Harvey Dinkins Jr. III. His mother was a domestic worker and his father a barber and real estate agent. 1. He was raised by his father after his parents separated when he was 6 years old. 4. Dinkins moved to Harlem as a child before returning to Trenton. He attended Trenton Central High School, where he graduated in 1945 in the top 10% of his class. Upon graduating, Dinkins attempted to enlist in the United States Marine Corps but was told that a racial quota had been filled. After traveling the Northeastern United States, he finally found a recruiting station that had not, in his words, filled their quota for Negro Marines. However, World War II was over before Dinkins finished boot camp. 5. He served in the Marine Corps from July 1945 through August 1946, attaining the rank of private first class. 6, 7, 8. Dinkins was among the Montford Point Marines whom received the Congressional Gold Medal from the United States Senate and House of Representatives. 5. Dinkins graduated cum laude from Howard University I, with a bachelor's degree in mathematics in 1950. He received his Bachelor of Laws from Brooklyn Law School in 1956. 8, 9. While maintaining a private law practice from 1956 to 1975, Dinkins rose through the Democratic Party organization in Harlem, beginning at the Carver Democratic Club under the aegis of J. Raymond Jones. 110. He became part of an influential group of African American politicians that included Denny Farrell, Percy Sutton, Basil Patterson, and Charles Rangel. The latter three together with Dinkins were known as the Gang of Four. 11. As an investor, Dinkins was one of 50 African American investors who helped Percy Sutton found Inner City Broadcasting Corporation in 1971. Citation needed. Dinkins briefly served as a member of the New York State Assembly, 78th D, in 1966. He was nominated as a deputy mayor by Mayor Abraham D. Beam but was ultimately not appointed. Citation needed. Thereafter, Dinkins served as president of the New York City Board of Elections, 1972 to 1973, and as New York City Clerk, 1975 to 1985. 12. He was elected Manhattan Borough President in 1985 on his third run for that office. On November 7, 1989, Dinkins was elected mayor of New York City, defeating three-term incumbent Mayor Ed Koch and two others in the Democratic primary and Republican nominee Rudy Giuliani in the general election. Dinkins came to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menahem Mendel Schneerson, seeking his blessing and endorsement. 13. Dinkins was elected in the wake of a corruption scandal that involved several New York City Democratic leaders. Mayor Koch, the presumptive Democratic nominee, was politically damaged by the corruption in his administration and his handling of racial issues, and among the candidates Dinkins was his greatest challenger. 14. Additionally, the fact that Dinkins was African American helped him to avoid criticism that he was ignoring the black vote by campaigning to whites. 15. While a large turnout of African American voters was important to his election, Dinkins campaigned throughout the city. 1. Dinkins' campaign manager was political consultant William Lynch Jr., who became one of his first deputy mayors. 16. Dinkins entered office in January 1990 pledging racial healing, and famously referred to New York City's demographic diversity as a gorgeous mosaic. 17. The crime rate in New York City had risen alarmingly during the 1980s, and the rate of homicide in particular reached an all-time high of 2,245 cases during 1990, the first year of the Dinkins administration. 18. The rates of most crimes, including all categories of violent crime, then declined during the remainder of his 4-year term. That ended a 30-year upward spiral and initiated a trend of falling rates that continued and accelerated beyond his term. 1920, however, the high absolute levels, the peak early in his administration, and the only modest decline subsequently, homicide down 12% from 1990 to 1993-21, resulted in Dinkins suffering politically from the perception that crime remained out of control on his watch. 22-23, Dinkins in fact initiated a hiring program that expanded the police department nearly 25%. The New York Times reported, he obtained the state legislature's permission to dedicate a tax to hire thousands of police officers, and he fought to preserve a portion of that anti-crime money to keep schools open into the evening, an award-winning initiative that kept tens of thousands of teenagers off the street. 23-24. During his final days in office, Dinkins made last-minute negotiations with the sanitation workers, presumably to preserve the public status of garbage removal. Rudy Giuliani, who defeated Dinkins in the 1993 mayoral race, blamed Dinkins for a cheap political trick when Dinkins planned the resignation of Victor Gottbaum, Dinkins' appointee on the Board of Education, thus guaranteeing Gottbaum's replacement 6 months in office. 25. Dinkins also signed a last-minute 99-year lease with the Houston National Tennis Center. By negotiating a fee for New York City based on the event's gross income, the Dinkins administration made a deal with the U.S. Open that brings more economic benefit to the city of New York each year than the New York Yankees, New York Mets, New York Knicks, and New York Rangers combined. 1. The city's revenue-producing events Fashion Week, Disambiguation Needed, Restaurant Week, and Broadway on Broadway were all created under Dinkins. 26. Dinkins's term was marked by polarizing events such as the family Red Apple boycott, a boycott of a Korean-owned grocery in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and the 1991 Crown Heights riot. When Lamrick Nelson was acquitted of murdering Yankel Rosenbaum during the Crown Heights riots, Dinkins said, "I have no doubt that in this case the criminal justice system has operated fairly and openly." 27. Later he wrote in his memoirs, "I continue to fail to understand that verdict." 1. In 1991, when Iraqi Scud missiles were falling in Israel 28, and the mayor's press secretary said security would be tight and gas masks would be provided for the contingent, 29, Mayor Dinkins visited Israel as a sign of support. 30. The Dinkins administration was adversely affected by a declining economy, which led to lower tax revenue and budget shortfalls. 31. Nevertheless, Dinkins' mayoralty was marked by a number of significant achievements. 31. New York City's crime rate, including the murder rate, declined in Dinkins' final years in office. Dinkins persuaded the state legislature to dedicate certain tax revenue for crime control, including an increase in the size of the New York Police Department along with after-school programs for teenagers, and he hired Raymond W. Kelly as police commissioner. 31. Times Square was cleaned up during Dinkins' term, and he persuaded the Walt Disney Corporation to rehabilitate the old New Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street. 31. The city negotiated a 99-year lease of city park space to the United States Tennis Association to create the Houston National Tennis Center, which Mayor Michael Bloomberg later called the only good athletic sports stadium deal, not just in New York, but in the country. 31. Dinkins continued an initiative begun by Ed Koch to rehabilitate dilapidated housing in northern Harlem, the South Bronx, and Brooklyn. Overall, more housing was rehabilitated in Dinkins' only term than Giuliani's 2 terms. 31. With the support of Governor Mario Cuomo, the city invested in supportive housing for mentally ill homeless people and achieved a decrease in the size of the city's homeless shelter population to its lowest point in 2 decades. 23.